right, hello and welcome. This is the weekly Antelope Node Operators Roundtable. Today is the 29th of November, 2023, and we'll be discussing some updates on release schedule, as well as getting into the topic of Prometheus in the context of Antelope. So again, if you're watching this on YouTube, help us spread the word about EOS and Antelope by sharing this video with folks that you might think would be interested in it. And if you are an Antelope node operator watching this on YouTube, you can join the call live every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern. The Zoom call details are in the description of the video. And also you can find more details on the Antelope Node Operators Roundtable Telegram channel, which you can likely find by asking any node operator you know. So with that, let's get into it. So release schedule updates is where I wanted to start off. And so we've got actually several releases right around the corner. One of which, the most notable of which, of course, is the release candidate 3 for 5.0, which also unfortunately has the most sort of uncertainty, because we are waiting for one more item sort of estimate to get it across the finish line. We're optimistic that it will still go on the date that we've communicated previously, which is December 6th. But you know, it might be that the estimates on that remaining item push past that, and we'll keep you informed here and on Telegram if that date changes. But otherwise, look for release candidate 3 of 5.0 on the 6th of December, which is next week. Aligned with that, we do have some patch releases that we're planning to release for 3.2. So it would be 3.2.5 and 4.0, which would be 4.0.5. Basically the impetus for those releases is that we did discover in early testing for 5.0 that there's an incompatibility with the way that base64 encoding works in 5.0 versus earlier versions. But it turns out that the way we're doing it in 5.0 is actually more correct. And there's basically a bug that we discovered through this process. So rather than fixing, that's air quotes, fixing 5.0 to be inaccurate, we've created some changes to prior versions. So those we're planning for those to also go basically in alignment with the 5.0 release candidate 3 on the 6th of December, which is next week. Final update is that we were planning to push, go to stable as quickly as possible after release candidate 3. But after some further discussion, we realized that, one, we don't anticipate any meaningful changes between release candidate 3 and stable, because there's already, been a fairly lengthy period of the features within release candidate 3 being kind of available and even sort of put through their paces, namely by Matthew Darwin and of course us internally. So we don't anticipate changes. So really marking it as stable is mostly just a communication that we're ready to support, right? Which means like critical patches and that sort of thing. And so the determination we made is that ideally we wouldn't do a release right before American holidays and most of our staff being unavailable, because then if something does go down, right, it would be painful to get the right folks together to do the patches that would be required. So with that in mind, we're planning on basically holding marking stable until the new year. So that would be around January 3rd-ish. So probably that first week back is when, assuming that there's no reports on issues with RC3, that's when we will plan to go with a stable release. Let me just take a look at my notes and see if I'm missing anything else here. Yeah, I think that covers it for sort of release schedule updates. So again, just to summarize and reiterate, ideally RC3 of 5.0 and patch releases for 3.2.5 and 4.0.5 will all go next week, December 6th. There is some risk that the RC3 will have to delay, which we'll keep you updated on. And then the stable we're shooting for just after the new year. Any questions or comments or additions to that release update?
Do we really expect more testing between RC3 and stable?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very valid question. And optimistically, it'd be great to have some more folks kick the tires on that. I think pragmatically, that is a point that we discussed, is that a lot of people are not going to pick it up until the stable is, marked on it, right? We even did briefly discuss sort of skipping RC3 altogether and just calling it stable, you know what I mean? But ultimately, with, a lot of folks out of office coming soon, we decided that conservatism is probably best. So yeah, I mean, call to action when RC3 is available next week. If any of you are able to install it, especially on like API nodes, for example, and let us know any issues you have with installing it, syncing it, running it, etc. Right? So that those issues can be fixed prior to stable. But yeah, so to answer your question, it would be nice. Pragmatically, probably not, maybe not, right? But I think the conservative approach will pay off here just in case.
We've held off rolling it out anymore, waiting on RC3 just because of the potential for the feature ID mismatch or whatever, which I think maybe that wasn't or identified as maybe it wouldn't be an issue. I don't remember what the final answer was, but we haven't rolled it out heavily on all of our nodes other than Jungle, waiting on anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's worth noting. I think this is most likely just kind of a detail, but that the BLS updates, which is what we're waiting on with 5.0, will entail a change in host function naming between current release candidates or previous release candidates and RC3. So I think it's a detail since there's not a lot of adoption on 5.0 in the first place, and even if there is, there's not really adoption on the BLS host functions, nor are we pushing for that at this time. We will, I guess it's worth also noting that we're discussing kind of what to do for Jungle, which part of the concept right now is that when RC3 is available, so I guess this is another take on answering your question, Matthew, that I sort of forgot was we have discussed sort of asking for folks to not only upgrade to 5.0 for Jungle, but also activate protocol features. So that's the deferred transaction removal and the BLS host functions. And that is an area that certainly has not been really put through its paces in kind of a pseudo live context, right? So that could potentially result in some new information.
I mean, I think in the past, all the features have been activated on Jungle before we get to final release.
True,
Right.
but one of them is now changing, right? So I mean, we need to wait on that version in the BLS feature activation.
Yes.
Yes, you do need to wait on the BLS activation until we get at least RC3 out.
Right. Because the host function naming, I mean, the implementation is different, but also the actual host function itself, like name is different.
So I think Michael's question is still not answered, which is the signatures changing in the Node.js protocol features directory?
It was a feature ID
Yes.
or something, right?
Yes, so we're going to rename the BLS primitives to BLS primitives 2, I believe, and it'll have a new hash associated with it as well.
So that way it won't conflict with the existing.
Correct. The bigger issue was the conflicting, but yeah, so it's just going to be BLS 2. So it,
Yes. Yeah.
right,
So then there's no problem.
just trash.
All
Then I'd
right.
say, I guess as soon as RC3 is out, we'll make a push on Jungle to light up those protocols. I mean, that sounds like maybe next week. That'll be the call to action.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, again, assuming that the BLS work is merged in time, then next week would be our timeline there, which I'm optimistic about, but I've been surprised many times. So anyway.
But
okay.
3.2
yeah,
and 4.0 is not waiting on BLS really, right? So those could already be done.
No, so they're not. Yeah, they're not. They're not waiting on the BLS.
I'm just like wondering
but we
why
are,
those things have to go together.
for reasons. So all will be revealed anyway. Yeah, there's very pragmatic reasons that I'm not really ready to discuss yet, but you'll see them soon. So okay.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on release schedule prior to moving into discussing Prometheus? Excellent. So there's been some recent discussion around Prometheus, and the illustrious Kevin has weighed in with a lot of responses. Before the call, this was a topic that was brought up that might be good to go into at least briefly, so that just to sort of more widely disseminate that knowledge. Let's see, who would be better to kick this off? Should Kevin give an intro, or should Matthew Darwin give an intro? Should we eeny, meeny, miny, mo?
Pick one.
Yeah.
That's a tiger by
Let's
the
go.
toe.
Let's go with Matthew. Could you give just sort of a high level introduction, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I guess the high level is, we're one of the people who asked for Prometheus metrics, so kind of need to check whether they're working or not. So one of the guys on our team, Hal, has been trying to create Grafana dashboards from the metrics, and once he started looking at them, it's like, I don't understand this seems weird, whatever. Came up with a whole bunch of comments and questions, and so then all that got put into a list for dev team to comment on, instead of opening like a pile of GitHub issues on that. So I think some of those things will turn into GitHub issues, but anyway, that's really the context. Trying to take those Prometheus metrics and make something usable out of them. So I will say, there with Prometheus, there's like a little helpline that goes with each metric. So some of those helplines are not too clear about what the metric is or the units. It's like amount of time something takes or whatever. It's like, okay, but it's in seconds, microseconds, nanoseconds, what unit? It's really not clear. So some more, guidance for the dev team would be to, try to think about it from an external user who doesn't know the internals of the code, about, that kind of stuff when you're writing those little help lines. I mean, it doesn't need to be, a paragraph, but, explaining what the units is would be helpful, unless the units are in the name of the metric. Like, I think the Node.js config.ini does a pretty good job at explaining the units. It's either in the name or in the description, but the same, attention to detail was not put in the Prometheus metrics.
Yeah, that's very fair, and appreciate you going through those. Yep, Prometheus is not something that any of us, any of the developers run or really know hardly anything about, and so we're kind of in an area that is not familiar to really any of us. But we certainly do appreciate the feedback. I think if you can get all that into APR or number of PRs, then we can kind of hopefully get those addressed, whether it be in a 5.0 future patch release, or eventually in the 6.0 if nowhere else. But and then so increasing the help, I think there's probably, I'm sure there'll be some additional metrics that you'll be interested in adding. I think there was a few of the metrics you mentioned would be better served if they were per connection as opposed to global. Maybe we went to global one, but also would like it per connection. So, wrapping all that up into summaries and into GitHub would certainly be useful. And yeah, again, I think we can address it. Most of it probably could be, I don't know, we could discuss internally, but in my mind, I think most of it could be done in patch releases on 5.0. I don't think it necessarily needs to wait all the way to 6.0 for something like, like Prometheus to,
Yeah, so I think one of the things philosophically is I don't think we need to repeat metrics that are split out by, connection and a total metric, because most people, you can use the sum function. So you can get the total by just adding the individuals.
Okay, and you just do that on the client, right?
Yeah, you just do that on the client. You just tell it to total up everything with the same metric with a different labels, but they're all the same metric. So you can easily just run a sum function on it. So to save storage space, we don't need to actually repeat anything global and per connection. The per connection is enough.
Okay, all right, it's good to know.
The other thing that, I don't know, maybe it's a discussion point is, some of the metrics were exported as, 0 because the connection is not, available. So in my mind, it seems like that should not even be a line in the output, because now we're storing 0 for no reason. Whereas you could infer that it's 0 if the data is not there.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know, like, that's easy to fix. Matter of fact, it used to be the other way, and I added it. I thought it'd be useful to have that information reported. But yeah, certainly if that makes sense, we can just remove them if they're not there. If they're not.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has other opinions. So
I mean, it's more of a front end side. You just tick the box that says if value isn't there, assume it's 0. So I mean, Grafana can try to help kind of fill it in for you. I mean, there is something to be said about having 0 values.
Yeah, I mean it's defined in the list of possible hosts, right? But it's connected equals 0, and then bytes receive 0, transactions receive 0, whatever, 0, 0, 0, 0, like everything's 0. So I don't know if that, and then the connection ID, when it actually connects, then it's going to get a different connection ID anyway. So then that thing that was not connected is always 0 forever. I don't know. Seems to have.
I think in the latest code, the connection ID should be stable across not connected and connected.
I thought it was
for outgoing. Is that true? I believe. Yeah, maybe that's not true. Anyway, we need to fix the connection ID anyway because it's not stable across restart. Yeah, we were originally going with a number, and then I changed it to the connection ID, but the connection ID is random on startup. We really need to do that. And I think probably the real answer there is we ought to change the connection ID in Node.js itself, not to be random, but to be a hash of something that's unique to the node. Maybe it's server address and directory location and configuration or something. I don't know, something that's fairly stable. That way, for things like Prometheus or even just logging, if you get a connection from an external host, it would be somewhat, deterministic unless they change some configuration settings or something that it's the same node. Seems like that would be useful. Because currently the node ID of a node is just a random set of bits. So
yeah, so why do we need to hash it based on the config INI or something? Why can't it be something even more stable?
I mean, we could hash the MAC address or something if we can make it something very stable like that. We need to distinguish between, if you've got multiple nodes running on a machine, we'd want to distinguish between those two. So maybe just server address or maybe server address, and seems like you need something more than just server address. But
yeah, well, I mean, MAC address, if you're running multiple nodes on one machine, you use the same MAC address for that.
Right.
Unless you're inside a container, and then in which case the MAC address changes every time you restart the container. I think.
Oh, well, then maybe MAC address isn't the best thing. But I mean, we could certainly fold in the listen port into whatever. So we could do something plus a listen port to get a unique on a node.
Or the other thing, why don't
I
we
think
store
ultimately
it some way? Once you calculate this random thing, then you store it in a file, and then you have it.
Yeah, the problem with that is we don't really have anything else like that that we store.
Protocol features, they'll get generated and stored.
Okay. All right. Point taken.
I don't know. Right.
It seems the crux of this is determining what precisely the logical definition of a node is. Like, because that's, you want it to be consistent based on like sort of the practical logical usage of like why you would want to know something is the same node.
In Ethereum land, you generate a node ID on startup, and then it's a file that it uses the same one every time it starts. Right.
Okay. I mean, yeah, we could certainly consider that. That'd be a 6.0 thing. We wouldn't want to do that in a patch.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure if that's the best practice, but it's pretty common, I guess.
Yeah.
But in Ethereum land, of course, every peer-to-peer connection you send, you need the peer's node ID in order to connect.
Yeah, that connection ID is currently sent across the wire. It is used to identify nodes. It's just the way we get that node ID is just a random set of bits on startup. So, but yeah, we can change that to be something else.
Leap util -- generate node ID.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, yeah, so yeah, the whole labeling discussion of the Prometheus metrics is awkward at this moment. So there's already a PR for labels, which we discussed last week. And then there's this node ID thing as well. So so this is an interesting thing as we start looking into trying to generate something useful on a dashboard, and then whoops, actually it's very hard. So
yeah, I mean, the other option is we could use the configuration of the, what is it, the node shoot, what's that thing called, that you already fill out as part of your config.ini.
the agent name,
the agent name.
ID.
Yeah, I mean, the problem there is that you get duplicates, right? Now we could enforce uniqueness there, like you wouldn't be allowed to connect unless you come up with a unique agent name. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of agent, like there was some example config.ini from like the Genesis days, and people, just copy that agent name in there, and they put quotes in it, but the agent name doesn't need quotes. So then the quotes they're part of the agent name that gets transmitted. So it's a bit messy what people have in there.
Yeah, and we could change that to like generate a random agent name, but the problem is once it's there, right? You can't, you don't want to overwrite it. But
I've been known to copy my configs and miss updating API 03 to SHO2, and then eventually, I catch it and update it. But yeah, I'd hate to get blocked at the peer-to-peer level just because I accidentally copied.
Yeah, I mean, we have a script that updates our agent name based on whatever the protocol, the features in config.ini. It reads it, figures out which features you have enabled, and then it updates the agent name to match the, is this a transaction node or not? And then, puts a nice description there so people can figure out what you're getting.
Well, figure out the relative term. I have kind of learned the EOS Nation nomenclature.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I didn't want it to be like this really long description, so I think it's like !TRX, meaning not transactions.
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense.
Well, not is not an exclamation mark. I don't know. So
I think what we could do, is we could just add a new config.ini option called connection ID and have it generated on the first time to be, some random thing. And then you can set it if you want to, but that then becomes your connection ID. And then, yeah, that's the file it's in, it's in your config.ini. Seems like a,
yeah, but if you're generating it on startup, how are you editing the config.ini?
Well, it's any new configuration we add in the future. Oh, that's true. We could generate it if you generate a new one, but if not, like we could just require it on startup, and so that you'd require the user to set it.
So you mean print default config would generate something random in there?
Right. And we could potentially even append it to config.ini, assuming it's writable, which it might not be.
Yeah, in our environment, it's definitely not writable.
Yeah, probably fairly common for it not to be writable. So yeah, and then it's back to putting it into a different file. Yeah. All right.
Well, there is a long-standing feature request that I have since 4 years ago to allow config.ini to be split across multiple files.
Include
like the Debian,
that'd be great.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Debian.d kind of files, right? Right, because then you could have a unique file just for the node ID.
Right.
And that way, to handle like Michael's situation where you want to copy paste most of the configs all the time, but then there's this little part that varies for this node, then that's in a separate one. That was definitely our use case. So instead, we just have processes that rewrite the one file, because that's all we have. Or I guess maybe an interesting question. How many people do you use config.ini versus putting all the command line arguments?
I've actually been surprised to see a lot of people how you doing it? Here's my launch statement. I'm like, oh, forgot you do that.
Yeah, yeah, there is a certain segment that does that. Like fairly recently, we switched all of our integration tests to do it that way. Instead of writing out the config.ini file, we just pass it all on the command line. There's benefits to that, for sure. Like you don't have to, like when you're looking at the test scripts and what's running and everything, it's easier to figure out when it's all on the command line. And you can do a PS command and see all the commands that are associated with like a given running Nodius, which is kind of handy as well, which you're not exposed if it's all in the config.ini. So yeah, so
Yeah, but you don't want to
we
put
talked
your
about that.
EP key on the command line, probably.
well, yeah, that's true.
But yes, we talked about the ability to see those config.ini things, else the config.ini itself or the startup parameters. That's a different issue, I guess.
Yeah, and now that we've split off the ability to have different HTTP ports for various things, like I think it does probably it may make sense to add an endpoint that gives you basically what's logged, like give you all non-default options.
Yeah.
Or just give you all options, one or the other, but yeah.
Get info
Yeah, you
too.
can
Here
give
we
all
come.
options and say whether they're default or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, I love the new ports. All the upgraded 5.0 nodes have separated all the ports, and then that broke a few things. It's like, oh, whoops! Now we have more security, so and to fix a few things.
Yeah, certainly easier to like be able to do things on a node that's exposed to the public, because yeah, now you can keep that like net connect and disconnect available even on a public API node, or if you want.
Yeah, the one that got me was the producer get protocol feature activated features or something, which is in the producer API instead of the chain API. I don't know why it's there.
Yeah.
But...
yeah.
But anyway, it's like, well, I need the details, because if you look at our public API endpoints, it gives you a list of all the protocol features and whether they're activated or not on the splash page. So I need that protocol feature, but it's not available because it's an API node, and that thing was hidden behind the firewall now. So anyway,
right, we could
have to write a thing to work around that.
Yeah, well, now that we have groups, like we could actually move that item to the different group, but keep its URL the same. So the problem before was the URL was tied to the plugin, which was tied to whether it was enabled or not, et cetera, et cetera. But now that we have the various groups, like we could move that one from the producer group into the chain group, have the same URLs in a different group, or put it in both groups. Like get info is in all groups effectively, right? So you could put that in both groups. Anything that's read only seems like would be useful to put in the chain RO group.
I'm not going to suggest that, because then it just starts getting really confusing. So it's kind of clear the way it is now, with only the one exception of get info, because we all said how much we need get info for everything. So so yeah, it's fine. I have a workaround. I just run the process on another node, dump a JSON file, send the JSON file across, and then that's now available for the website. So it works. All right, well, I guess that's it for this discussion.
All right. But that is the extent of our agenda for today. So with that, I will say thanks for joining, and we will see you again next week, when hopefully we will be discussing the RC3 that is hot off the presses.
All right, look forward to it.
Bye.
Go EOS.